So I'm Rebecca Ferguson from the Open University, and also some of the work that we've done here was part of the LACE project, the Learning Analytics Community Exchange for Europe. We've got other members of the LACE project here. Touré is over there, Dai is over there, Maren is over there. All been involved to some extent in this work on the Evidence Hub.
And I'm Doug Clow. I'm also from the Open University, and we're going to talk about our paper about evidence and learning analytics. There was a really good thing that came up out of in the discussion that gives us a really nice segue into our talk, which was about the field of medicine. And when you look at fields that use evidence, I think medicine and psychology are a little bit ahead of us in terms of debating and understanding what we mean by evidence and how we can use that rigorously and some of the problems with it. So to start off, we'll do a quick skate through what they're doing and how we might match up. In the world of medicine, there's been a transformation in the last 30 years or so in a shift to evidence-based practice, and they have this model of a hierarchy of evidence which starts with animal and laboratory studies. We don't tend to do animal studies except with stuff with students. I didn't need to do that. The idea is that the evidence as you move up the pyramid gets more and more reliable, more and more robust, and they have this idea that really, unless you're coming in at the randomized controlled trial level, that's the beginning of robust evidence, and even a single well-conducted large-scale randomized controlled trial, you can't rely on just one of those. You have to look at a whole range of those to be able to get a robust feeling for effect size and to deal with a whole load of problems. So what you really need is, towards the top of that, is a meta-analysis or a systematic review looking at what's going on in a whole range of randomized controlled trials, and then that feeds into the clinical practice guidelines that is what people actually do. And when you compare, what we did was looking at learning analytics as a field and the evidence we've got. Very little of what we've got in terms of papers in learning analytics gets even this far. It's more up in this sort of level, and quite often we're right down this level. We're just reporting on here's what we did and what happened, rather than comparing what we were doing to anything else. So we're less mature, I think, as a discipline in terms of the use of evidence. But even within those fields where you have that level of evidence, there's problems in dealing with this, and I'm going to skate over a few of those because those people have problems in those fields. We have at least that bad of a problem. You can't always run a randomized controlled trial. It's not always appropriate. One proposal was to run a randomized controlled trial for testing the efficacy of parachutes for protecting against injury when falling from an aeroplane. Because there is no research on it, there is no evidence in that strong sense that wearing a parachute to protect you from injury when you leap out of an aeroplane at altitude, there's no evidence that that will help. We're not going to run a trial on that because we are sufficiently confident in our model of what would happen that we think that the cost in terms of lives lost isn't worth it. So that's one sort of problem. But even when you do trials or quantitative research, when you're looking at the fundamental science, generating lots and lots of data doesn't always help you have robust findings. There's a famous paper looking at fMRI scans. There's a huge rush of, we can put people into fMRI scanners, this is in psychology, and try to understand what's going on actually inside their brain. We had the keynote this morning saying it's hard to look inside the brain. We're beginning to get some pictures of that with fMRI scanners. But there are issues in over-interpreting that data. You're generating lots and lots of data, so it's quite easy to have false positives. And there's this paper that found a response in the brain of a dead salmon in an fMRI scanner when it was given an emotionally challenging task to match emotional expressions with feelings. So it was showing this dead salmon in the fMRI scanner these photos and they asked the dead salmon to match the emotion to the photo, and they found the location in the salmon's brain which was lighting up when it was being asked to do this task, because there's so many voxels inside their head that one of those is bound to shine up just by chance. So even when you're dealing with that level of quantitative data and you've got lots of it, it's still very easy to end up with entirely false findings. And even when you're looking at a less massive data and you're running a trial, this is an example of doing some research on jelly beans cause acne. And this, apologies to those of you who've seen this cartoon before, but I think it's a really great illustration. They're saying, oh, jelly beans cause acne. Come on, scientists, stop playing Minecraft, come and investigate this for us. So they go off and investigate it, they do a trial and they say, okay, we found there's no link between jelly beans and acne at the P greater than 0.05 level. How many people here are confident that the academics and students that they work with understand what is meant by P greater than 0.5? Are we all confident that all of the people we work with understand that basic level? With what probability? Yes. So the response to this is, so we did the study, didn't find anything. What do we do? And so that sounds like the scientist. Someone says, oh, I've heard it's only the colour of jelly beans that makes a difference. So off they go. Never mind playing Minecraft. They do some more tests. We found no link between them with purple jelly, brown jelly beans, pink jelly beans, no result. Blue jelly beans, no result. All of the different colours were in pink, red, turquoise, magenta, yellow, no effect. All of these things, no effect at the P 0.05. Grey jelly beans, tan jelly beans, nothing. Cyan jelly beans, green jelly beans, got a finding, significance at the P less than 0.05 level. Nothing with mauve, nothing with beige, nothing with lilac, nothing with black, nothing with peach, nothing with orange. So what do we conclude from that? Green jelly beans. Being really crude, there's only 5% chance of coincidence. That's not what a P less than 0.5% means. But it's really easy to present that cut. Just for those of you who don't understand that, the chance here, almost what you're saying when you're saying P's less than 0.05 is that the chance of seeing an effect this big, completely by chance, if there were no relationship, is 5%. We've just done 20 trials of the same thing, and we've picked the one where it came up right. Maybe there's a problem with what we're doing there and we're not quite so robust. And that's where you've got really quite robust data that everybody agrees about. And it gets worse than that with education.
Okay, so when we move across from general evidence to education, we run into more problems. Because there are so many, this is my daughter doing homework a few years back. We know from the keynote this morning, there are so many variables involved in education. There's the home environment, there's how late you stayed up last night, there's how you feel in relation to your learning, there's what you've been told to do, all sorts of things like that. And we don't even agree on what the proxies for learning are. How can we tell if people have learnt? Do we have to look inside their heads to find that out, or is there some proxy outside? And people have been trying to move towards this. So one example, PISA, the PISA studies. Since the year 2000, every 3 years, the PISA study has been carried out. Countries across the world randomly selected students. They've agreed on what their proxy for learning is. It's reading, it's maths, it's science. It's doing those things individually. Can you do those things individually? Let's check it. Let's run a questionnaire to find out some of the contextual variables about that. And then we can do longitudinal studies, which sounds great, doesn't it? That sounds like the direction we should be moving in. Except, of course, as soon as we do that, people start gaming that. And people start going, well, we'll just submit people from one area of our country. And when we submit the people from that area, well, we'll exclude the people who we don't think are going to do very well. And that moves us up the PISA rankings. The other problem we get with the validity is we don't have enough data. For example, Argentina there was excluded for not enough data. And the final problem we get with validity is that people read too much into it. So what we've got is 15-year-olds who were tested on reading, maths and science. The headlines we've got are PISA confirms excellence of a handful of nations. The entire country is brilliant because some of their 15-year-olds can read a little bit better than other countries. Finland's schools were once the envy of the world. Now they're slipping. Well, they might be slipping in those areas. They might be doing really well in other areas. So validity is not just about what we do as researchers. It's about how people understand what we do as researchers. So a huge amount of problems with evidence, problems filed upon problems. But there's no good us just telling you about the problems. What do we need to do about it? How do we need to move forward? Now, one of the ways that the LACE project decided to move things forward was to bring together what evidence do we actually have in learning analytics? Let's gather it. So we looked at LAK conference proceedings, we looked at the Journal of Learning Analytics, we looked at educational data mining. We came to the LAK conference last year and said, can you contribute? And we said, we're going to see what we've got evidence of, and we're going to relate it to 4 statements. Basically, have we got evidence that analytics supports learning? Have we got evidence it supports teaching? Have we got evidence it's carried out at scale? And have we got evidence it's done ethically? Please all bring us your evidence. And we got a lot of evidence together, and we ran it through the Evidence Hub, and we did some analysis of it. And you can go and look at the Evidence Hub, see what's in there. If you've got evidence that's not in there, do tell us, put it in there. We're open to it. We produced this diagram. I don't think that diagram's coming up.
It failed to come out, isn't it?
Really failing to come out on a slide, but what the diagram does show, you can tell from the bands in the middle, we had a huge amount of positive evidence. We had a little bit of neutral evidence, and we have almost no negative evidence. Well, so that's brilliant, isn't it? We've got all this positive evidence in the field. Hey! But it seems a bit unlikely, doesn't it? It seems unlikely that every time we do a study, we come up with positive evidence. What's happening to that negative evidence? Where is it getting hidden away? And why don't we see a representative field? Why do we see so much research about universities and learning? Why do we see so little about what's going on in the workplace? Why don't we see much more about teaching? So there was an imbalance that we identified in the education. We don't think it represents what is out there in the field. So I'm going to hand over to Doug.
Okay. And the other main finding that we found that was quite startling was that very little of the vast number of excellent papers from the field are actually evidence in a really strong sense of being evidence that what we're doing improves things for learners at the end of the day or improves things for teachers at the end of the day. And very little of it sort of closes this loop and shows us the whole of this picture of learning analytics, producing data, getting metrics, and using that to drive interventions that actually make things better for students. We haven't got as much evidence as we would really like to have. We're a quantitative field. Other people in education reject the whole use of numbers at all, so they have other sources of evidence. We're at least got our foot into the quantitative camp, and we've got very little evidence like that. One of the things we did in the paper, and you go and read the paper, was to look at of the evidence we have got that's got there, and let's have a look at all of those papers in detail and look about the level of claim. And one of the best ones we found that does show that that cycle and impact on actual learners is the paper about course signals at Purdue, sort of way back in 2007. They had dramatic increases with course signals. It's a predictive model, gives you traffic lights with interventions. And they saw with their actual students, they had dramatic increases in retention, and they saw in their thing, in dose response sort of thing, that the more courses students had been on with course signals, the better retention. There's a subtle problem with this study. We're not picking on this study because it's bad. It's because it's a good one, and it's one of the ones that is most cited. It's one of the most widely cited papers, and everyone talks about the Purdue signal stuff. There's a subtle problem there that the reviewers missed, and it was only picked up afterwards. We saw a dose response thing. The more exposure to course signals you have, the better your retention. But that's actually because you've been on more courses, so of course you've been retained more. And Al Essa, who's not here, did a model to sort of see what would happen if we just gave out chocolates to students on some courses, and we count up how many students get chocolates and look at the relationship between the number of chocolates you've got and retention. And sure enough, you see you get more chocolates with better retention. So clearly giving the chocolates improvement. It wasn't. That was right out of the model, and the effect that Al had in his model was about the same size as the sort of additive effect that the signals people had seen in their paper. For all sorts of complex reasons, Kim Arnold and Matt Pastilli aren't able to actually get hold of that data. There's a whole story that I or any of them will be happy to tell you about why they can't actually get on and reanalyse that data to control for that. Analysing data, getting strong, robust evidence is really, really difficult. This is definitely not to pick on Kim and Matt. This was good work, but there was a mistake that is really hard to address. Anyone can make a simple mistake, including us too.
Yeah, so just to say we're not picking on the signals paper in its entirety, here is a table which Doug and I put into a paper. In fact, we put this into a paper twice. It went to a LAK conference. It's in the Journal of Learning Analytics. We've got about 90 of you in the room now. I don't know if any of you can quickly spot the problem, but Doug and I are people who read papers quite carefully. We checked it. The LAK reviewers checked it. Journal of Learning Analytics people checked it. Has anybody spotted it? No. Right, so 50% and 7% there. If we go back, 37% and 0.2%. And actually 0.2% stood out to us so much that we wrote a little bit about it in the paper, how interesting it was that it was 0.2%. And it was only last week when a friend of Doug's was trying to put this into a chart. He said, hang on, the figures don't really work. So anybody can make a mistake, and reviewing is really, really important. So if you're doing any reviewing for LAK or the field, look at the tables as well as the text. So this all sounds like a disaster, doesn't it? It sounds like a wasteland of evidence is difficult, education is difficult, what we've done is difficult. But we can do something about it. We can be the heroes who move us on and deal with things and sort things out. There are ways for us to address this problem. So as the end to our paper, we've thought of things that everybody in this room can do to begin to solve this problem. And I'm going to hand over the clicker to Doug, and we're going to tell you about them.
Stand in the middle so that people might want to step back a little bit. Mm-hmm. So
I can stand here.
Oh, you can stand there. That's great. Okay, so our first suggestion is for the LAK community to use the peer review process to address the problem. The LAK community should prioritise gaps in the evidence in the call for papers. The LAK community should strengthen the scrutiny of statistics in the review process. Try and catch those things out. We should aim to make the findings more accessible to non-researchers. Our findings are all locked up, and if you haven't got an institutional login, it's hard to get hold of it. We should review best practice from fields more advanced in the use of evidence, like medicine and psychology, but we totally shouldn't fall on each other like the psychologists are doing. We should be nice. We should ask authors to identify how their work fits into the learning analytics cycle. How is this fitting into a bigger picture for actually making an impact on students? When we're bidding for grants, we should look at how your work could fill an existing gap in the evidence. The music should be going. We should bring together bodies of work and highlight the main findings. Are we still together? Yes, we're still together. That's good. Together. Great. We should look for pathways to impact. We should look at how you'll share your findings with those outside universities. We often face a university audience and talk to them, but the other people actually matter as well. We need to establish expectations about the quality of evidence. We need to build a culture that looks at what is the evidence that we're building. And finally, we should help our doctoral students to fill gaps that we can see and to fit their work into this cycle, into this bigger picture that we've got there. And then finally, we need you to make suggestions for what else we need to do. And we have a session later on today, a poster session, that's building on the fail-a-thon that we ran on Monday, because that was another idea that we had for what we should do to help with this. Look at the findings that don't make it into the journals and don't make it into the proceedings because things went wrong. How can we share that with each other? We share that in the fail-a-thon. And then rather than just dwell in our failure, we thought about what can we do to help. So we have a set of suggestions for how to help from that group who came along to the workshop. But we've got a poster with space for post-its from you to put things in there to say, this is what we could be doing to help improve the lack of evidence. So do come along to that later. I think that's us. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks Doug and Rebecca. All right, floor's open for bright ideas.
Which floor do you?
Applaud all your suggestions. But you started off sort of talking about finding evidence for like the efficacy of, or at least the paradigm I sort of understood was finding efficacy for learning analytics. My view is that sort of learning analytics is a process and not really a treatment. and it's a way of measuring the efficacy of other treatments. And so in that case, it sort of would seem that like publications on the use of learning analytics themselves, but learning analytics to me would be unimpeachable in the same way that the use of statistics to validate medicine is unimpeachable. Could you comment on sort of like that as being the same as your view or different? Or
I think that's slightly different because I think there is a bigger, certainly I'd see that the field is making a bigger claim than just to be a way of measuring the stuff that's going on elsewhere. I think there are a whole set of technologies and ideas that people see, particularly predictive analytics, personalization, a whole range of that sort of stuff. And there's 2 points to this. One, I think those sorts of things, those are learning analytics applications, and people, they're sold as literally sold as learning analytics applications. So I think it's incumbent on us to assess the level of evidence there. One of the things I would hasten to add that I didn't say in the talk is that other fields of technology and education don't even care about evidence in this strong sense at all. So I think when we say the evidence isn't as good as we'd like, we do have a concern about evidence, and it is a thing that you can pack a whole room at a conference when you're talking about this stuff. Who wants to know about that? So this is a live concern for us. Coming back to your point about seeing it as a process and a measuring tool, I think that is a way of seeing it, but I think that would put an even stronger expectation on us to demonstrate very rigorously that our methods are robust and measure real things and measure against known benchmark standards. Another good thing. Certainly, statistics. There's a huge range of publications and really quite detailed stuff that's way above the level that we scrutinise our processes in terms of calibrating it as a measurement instrument for measuring other stuff. So I think that if we're making that claim, that seems to be a much bigger level of claim to make about what we're doing than simply saying we think these things are going there. But that's my off-the-cuff idea.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Do you want to come back? Because it's.
Oh no.
Okay.
I think that's sort of what I was after. I would hope. Learning analytics to me, it hasn't been sort of like it's a thing. It sort of seems like it's a.
Well, there's a blog post about that.
Process, right?
Yeah.
It's applied statistics and applied computer science and other things. So if I saw a study that sort of said, oh, we applied something and used learning analytics and it failed, well, I would say, well, you did your treatment, whatever that failed. It wasn't. I mean, because you should be adapting, sound statistical practice and probability inference on your thing. If it didn't work, it's not because probability inference doesn't work for education, it's because your treatment didn't work.
No.
I think this is a subtle difference.
I'm right with you on that. And I think actually the area where we're struggling as a community, we're quite good, I think, at generating systems that alert when there's a problem. We're less good at building an evidence base about what sort of interventions help when we've got those problems. And the statistics we're talking about are well established in other fields and things. We're not needing to do anything sophisticated, but we need to achieve a level of sophistication slightly higher than we're managing so far, I think.
So maybe on that, Dario, to add to the psychology and medicine fields, to refer to maybe econometrics is a good one to go to, because not that I have a personal interest in that, but that's pretty much what we used last year when we started doing microeconometric analysis of learning analytics policies. And it's, maybe that's part of where it can go, is just developing an awareness of who has sound measurements of that side of things. Is that part of the evidence hub, and what you've included in there is the fields that are... Not
that level of analysis, I think, because we're not a lot of our stuff doesn't fit onto that paradigm yet.
I think one of the problems we had with the Evidence Hub is when we started off, we were trying to look at different levels of evidence, and we'd picked up on that pyramid of evidence, and our project reviewers said, can you classify the evidence? But when we came down to it, we couldn't, because it just didn't fit yet into those, we'd find one or two randomised controlled trials, but most of the work isn't there yet. We're sort of below that, and we need to be moving towards, well, what do we count as evidence, and how can we do that?
Do you want to? I think Bart wanted to come on that.
Taking a more positive spin, I mean, in your paper you have identified a couple of papers that have actually met some of those levels or are nearly there. So I'm quite surprised if you go to the Evidence Hub, you don't really see those.
It doesn't.
So isn't there also a push? Let's put the 10 most best papers on there and see also, in a sense, what is missing, so that we really push the field forward. Because in a way, it's easy to criticize if we're doing a good job. But how can we make more transparent what actually the findings are?
And I think one of the reasons that we keep coming to LAK and telling people about the Evidence Hub is if you've got evidence, put it in there, share it with everyone, tell everyone, get those ideas out there, because so often I get asked, okay, can you give me some good examples of learning analytics, helping learners, helping teachers? And I go, well, I know about what's happening at the Open University. I can tell you about good things we're doing, but I can't tell you about good things people are doing elsewhere. So if you are doing good things, share it, tell everyone, shout it from the rooftops, give us all a model.
I like that idea about highlighting the good stuff on there. At the moment, it just shows you the whole picture, so that's a nice next step there, so thanks.
Okay. I'll ask a final question for this. I thought at first this paper had been put in the wrong session. Right?
No.
This is an ethics session, and you're telling us about the paucity of the field and its evidence base. But if we take on board what we just heard from Paul and Sharon, they're saying we've got all this evidence and we should act on it. We may even be legally obliged to. You're saying, I'm not sure we have that much evidence. But I'm interested in your views on that. But why are you in an ethics session? not that I hold you responsible for the program. Have you got a view on that?
I think that is I think we have a responsibility, a sort of ethical responsibility, when we're going out there and telling people that we've got learning analytics, we've developed them, not to overclaim, to say this is where we are at the moment, this is where we hope to be, this is how we're moving along, but not to say, oh, well, if you run our learning analytics, we will be able to retain your learners, they'll do fabulously. They might do, and I hope they will do, but we need to be realistic about where we are and about where other people are. I think often people have the sense that, okay, my learning analytics didn't work, but everybody else's are working. I think it's something that we're all struggling with a field, and we all need to move forward. And I think the point about the validity of how people understand what we're doing is very important, how it is presented externally. Because as researchers, we can be very sort of precise about how we report things. But when it comes to university press releases, you know, they're much more, hey, look at what we've achieved. And we need to sort of rein that back and say, no, this is where we are, this is where we're going.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree. And the thing I want to come back to as well is the ethical imperative for us to test the stuff that we think is good. Not going as far as testing parachutes, but you can certainly test stuff that is life-saving and life-threatening. There was a huge, and evidence-based medicine's got there well before us. I vividly remember in the 80s and 90s when HIV and AIDS came out, and there was a real push to try and get treatments that would help it stop being, you know, you've got it, you're going to die. There was a huge ethical debate about what can we do to prove the value of these treatments without withholding them from people who are going to die if they don't get the treatments. And there's maths you can do to say that people have worked out processes and procedures for robustly generating the top quality evidence with the minimum impact on survivability, so that we know it's working, because a lot of treatments we think might work don't work. So you have to do the research. So I think we need to move away from saying that education isn't actually, we're not saving them from drowning, we're not saving them from falling out there, we're saving them from dropping out, which isn't quite as serious. And therefore, the imperative on us, it's still serious, I'm not saying it's not, but the imperative on us to do robust research on what we're suggesting to help students is even greater, I think, than it is for medicine. And that's an ethical imperative.
Right, let's thank Rebecca and Doug one more time.